Oh, you've muted yourself. I don't know what he touched, but he muted himself. Okay, let's get started. Hi, folks, and good evening. Thank you for joining me this Sunday evening as we spend yet another Sunday talking about the Constitution. After I tell all last week, I fed up talk about the Constitution. I didn't want to talk about the Constitution for a while. Here I am backpedaling on my promise to myself, and we're going to be discussing the Constitution. So I have waiting in my green room to chat with me a former senator, former chair of the Police Service Commission, and he was also a former Speaker of the House, Attorney Nizam Mohammed. So I reached out to him this week and asked if he would do me the honor of spending time with me on a Sunday afternoon. And you know, it's hard to give up your Sunday afternoon. You could be digesting a meal, having a nap, reading a good book. So to decide, yes, I'm going to spend an hour with Rhoda talking about the Constitution, that I would say, you know, is something I have to be grateful for. So he has muted himself in the green room, so I need him to unmute himself. If you can ask your technical director to come and unmute you, because you have muted yourself, and so that's why I can't hear you right now. Is there something you touched on your screen? Because I'm not hearing you. Maybe what I'll do is I'll put you out the room and then have you come back in. So click on the link and come back in, okay? Right. So he's going to click on the link and come back in. So we're going to be discussing two specific areas. We're talking about the Police Service Commission, and then we're going to be talking about what happened in the Parliament on Thursday. Right, great. There you go. You're up on the screen.
Right, so you're hearing me now.
I'm hearing you absolutely fine now. So, good afternoon. Thanks for joining me.
A very good afternoon to you. It is an honor for me to be on your show and to be with you, in your company, and in the company of your viewers.
I should let you all know he's very charming. Very,
Oh,
very, very charming. No, you are. You know you're charming. And you also know you're a great storyteller. So I have to be very careful. Very careful.
I've been a jury lawyer.
That's it. I think that's it. You're very good at pulling people in, because that first conversation we had, it could have gone on for a really long time.
True, true, true.
So what was it like being a jury lawyer? Are you still a jury lawyer?
Well, I think that, you know, I'm getting on now, and since we have closed down the courts because of this COVID situation, I haven't been, but I, I really enjoyed being a jury lawyer. Matter of fact, I have done so much work before Her Excellency the President in the criminal courts when she presided as a.
Right. Yes, of course, because she would have been a judge at that point in time.
So she was a first instance judge before she went to the Court of Appeal, and you know, many of my battles were before her.
Okay, so you have a sort of shared past with her in a sense.
In the sense that I know I had to deal with her, you know, days on end during some of these long trials. I looked at her temperament, her forthrightness, the manner in which she would deal with people and conduct the trials that she presided over and all of that, you know. So, although in a sense, you know, a nice working relationship developed. And this is what happens at the bar, where lawyers and judges, in years gone by, these days I don't think it is like that anymore. We really had a fraternity, a
Yeah.
very um, close knit fraternity where we helped each other towards the common goal of ensuring that justice be done in every situation, in which we were involved.
So, Nizam, tell me, how long have you been practicing law?
It's about 47 years. Before that, 47
Oh,
years,
wow.
1974.
Okay.
And yes, and before that, I am a graduate school teacher. I'm very proud about that. Graduate from Teachers College,
Yes.
Teachers Training College.
Okay. So you
You know,
taught before you became a lawyer?
yes, I was a school teacher. Not only in the primary schools, I taught at Astor Boys, which is a secondary school as well.
What did you teach?
I taught history, I taught literature, I taught the arts,
You see, this
Sunday.
is why you are so dangerous. Okay.
Yeah.
History and literature, that's a very, very wicked combination.
Yes,
So
it is.
you became. I want to start with your police service commission background first. I mean, I know we should, in terms of chronology, it would be your Speaker of the House. You would have been that first, but I wanted to talk about the Police Service Commission first because I feel it feeds into what happened on Parliament, what happened in Parliament on Thursday.
Okay.
All right. So you, as an attorney, would have been made the chair of the Police Service Commission. Tell me how that process goes. How exactly does one become appointed as the chairman of a commission?
I received a phone call from one of the ministers of government asking me whether I was willing to serve as chairman of the Police Service Commission. I saw that as a quasi judicial appointment. And, you know, I knew of the requirements in the sense of, um, it was like moving up from the bar at the courts onto the bench, not in that total way, but I knew that the moment you become chairman of a commission, you become so what I would say laid back in terms of um, the manner in which you would have to conduct yourself
Yes.
and carry the office with you. It's an extremely not only sensitive office, but very important under the Constitution. Indeed, all service commissions are like that.
Yes.
And
Because
it is a big challenge in third world countries like ours.
yes,
And,
because I was
sorry.
going to say, my understanding is that these service commissions have to position themselves in such a way that they are always perceived as being dispassionate, above the fray, and able to dispense their duties as even handedly as possible. Yeah?
As you put the chairman of a service commission on par with the judges of the High Court.
Ah,
That is
right.
what that is the approach that has to be adopted,
Okay.
and that is why I was attracted to that at that time, because I was so near to the bench for so many years, and I looked at our eminent judges and the way they manage their courts and the way they dispense to justice. So that for me, that was also a very outstanding learning experience for me in the development of my career as an attorney at law.
Okay. So, if you can throw your mind back to that period, what were your regular duties like when you functioned as a service commission? What did you do on a regular basis?
I was the chairman of the commission, so that the one thing I discovered on entering that office and acquainting myself with the staff and all of that, I realized that in order to discharge the responsibilities that were thrust upon you, that required full-time attention.
Right.
And I noticed that commission and other commissions, they operate part-time. So that was the first thing that I that bothered me, and I actually shared that feeling with my fellow commissioners at the time, that this is a full-time thing, you know. And so, what do you do when you undertake such a responsibility and you assume the office of chairman of the Police Service Commission? First thing that you do is you gather all the relevant law that that have to do the laws that have to do with your role and your function, and you make sure that whenever you are performing your duties, you are not overstepping, you know, the boundaries within which you are supposed to confine yourself. So
Okay.
that was one of the first things. But when I if I may speak about my time, when I assumed office, I told some of the senior police officers, and not necessarily the new um, commissioner and the deputy commissioner whom we had appointed from Canada, some of our locals who had known me in the court arena and over the years, and I indicated to them the importance of me familiarizing myself with the workings of the police service, to get a grasp of the service, to understand um, how the people over whom I had certain responsibilities to discharge, you know, how they think, how they work, how they carry out their duties, that
And
sort of
how
thing.
the organization is structured and meant to function?
Exactly,
Right.
exactly, you know. And sometimes I remember on one or two occasions, you know, I found myself in situations where I could have actually sensed raised eyebrows. What is the chairman of the commission doing here? I was not really spying on anyone. As I say, I was trying to get a firm grasp of what I was dealing with, because I was determined to fine tune that commission in such a way to ensure that there was a good, or rather an excellent working relationship between the members of the police service and the commission.
Right. Now, one of the things I noticed in looking at legislation is that the commissions are meant to be composed in a particular way. So you have to have somebody with a legal background, and then you have other persons, I think, with human resource backgrounds and other things. So I'm wondering, because you are a lawyer and you're a lawyer with long years of service and experience, did you advise your commission, or did you all seek legal advice outside of the commission when you needed legal advice?
Uh, Ordinarily and routinely, I, I, I would I would proffer my own legal opinions during our deliberations. And if we had anything that we thought should have greater um, legal attention and perhaps interpretation and that sort of thing, then we will so agree. I had one member who was also a lawyer on the commission as well. Not
Who
one, I beg your pardon, two.
who are they?
The late Addison Khan, and he was, I think, the president of the Industrial Court,
Okay.
and so he was retired as president. He had already retired, and Martin George.
Right. Yes. Yes.
So three of us were lawyers on that commission, and they were the ones who would actually buck me if I am uh, coming forward with some kind of legal interpretation or legal position, and so that helped me a lot in the sense that I was subject uh, to be scrutinized within the organization. It was a great help for me.
Right. So, okay, let me ask this because you did just mention Gibbs and Uwatsky. In your time, what was the appointment process like?
It was similar to what we are having at the moment. Nothing has changed in any major way.
Mm-hmm.
By the time we got in there and we took up office, um, at the time when we assumed office, that process was halfway done.
Mm-hmm.
It was only a matter of us telling these two gentlemen that we are ready for you. Please come into to Trinidad and formalize the the paperwork and that sort of thing, which was not our job.
Mm-hmm.
That was the job, I think, of the DPA. And so, as I say, we were well on our way to presiding over a police service commission, a police service that had um, a police commissioner and a new deputy commissioner.
So it was not a situation with that particular instant where you had to send any names forward to anybody. You didn't. Your commission didn't have to do that.
No, we didn't. We had gone past that.
Right. But that would have been part of the normal, it would have been part of the process. It's just that you would have been installed after that part of the process. Am I
Yes,
clear?
yes,
Am I
yes,
correct?
yes.
Okay, good.
You are correct.
Now, when Gibbs and Uwatsky resigned, were you still the head of the commission then?
No, no, no.
No.
I was already dismissed.
Okay, fair enough. But during your tenure, if they had resigned or if they, for some reason they were not there, what would have been the process for appointing an acting or a new commissioner?
Right. You make sure you follow the law,
Mm-hmm.
and uh, there is the details. There are the details in the constitution as to how you appoint the commissioner, and not the constitution. I beg your pardon. The other legislation, and you just follow that, and you draw up your list,
Mm-hmm.
and you submit that list, what we call the merit list,
Mm-hmm.
and you submit that merit list to Her Excellency the President. And at that time, I remember uh, the the office of the DPA hiring a foreign firm which had processed applications and done all the interviews and so on,
Mm-hmm.
and provided the commission. It is not that the commission who choose these people.
Mm-hmm.
It was a private firm, and I think in our case with Gibbs and Iwatsky, it was a foreign firm that had done.
The
Um,
headhunting and the
yeah,
assessment and shortlisting.
right.
Right.
And when that list was sent to the Police Service Commission, that list was forwarded to the Office of President.
Okay. So in your time, you didn't actually conduct the selection and evaluation. A foreign company did it. They passed the list on to you, and then you passed the list on to the president.
Yes.
And would the president then have to pass the list on to the parliament for a vote to take place?
Yes, that is what the law says. Yes.
Okay, so it continues exactly like that then.
Yes.
So now comes the sticky questions, Nizam.
Uh-huh.
In this entire, from the appointment of Mr. Griffith to act to now, there have been a number of questions in the public domain. A shortlist was created, a shortlist was sent to the president by the Service Commission. The president says, according to Legal Notice 183, she saw no place for her to act in paragraph 4. And she did not move on to looking at 123 of the Constitution. I'm sure you would have followed the whole legal matter with that. Did you have an opportunity to see or hear Justice Kangaloo's ruling?
Well, I heard Justice Kangaloo's ruling concerning that section 4,
Mm-hmm.
and we know she said that, that was unconstitutional or something like that.
Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, it was an action brought before the court for interpretation,
Mm-hmm.
and she gave that interpretation, and there has been no appeal, and everybody has accepted.
Mm-hmm.
So that Section 4 has created some serious problems,
Yes, it has.
and that is um, the genesis of the confusion
Mm-hmm.
that actually followed. So that we ended up in a situation where it seems as if Her Excellency the President um, was not sure as to what she should have done.
I get that. What I want to grasp is what would cause a service commission to think that it could act to appoint a commissioner?
Repeat that question again.
What would cause a service commission? So let's say it was still you who was chairman of the service commission, and
Yeah.
you know the process, and you know that the process is you pass on the list to the president, she then passes the list on to the parliament. What would cause any commission to then decide to take on the responsibility of the parliament?
Well, you follow the existing law. It is not for you
Mm-hmm.
as members of the commission to interpret and pass judgment in a negative way.
Mm-hmm.
Legislation. If legislation guides you, you adhere to the legislation and you exercise your functions in accordance with the existing legislation. You comply with the law, so to speak. So, to answer your question, I would say that they interpreted the law and they used the law to appoint Mr. Griffith as an acting commissioner of police.
Okay. Now, we know that Justice Kangaloo has ruled that what happened with paragraph 4 was unconstitutional, that Griffith is not meant to be the commissioner, and so his acting appointment was revoked and done away with. And the opposition leader has since used the outcome of that ruling to move a motion to get rid of the president, to have the president be removed. What are your thoughts on that motion?
Well, that the motion in the first place, I think it was um, pure politics and it was totally misplaced. I do not think that there was any merit in the motion that was filed.
Mm-hmm.
I looked at the motion, we had the benefit of reading that motion. It was front page but,
Yes, it was.
in the newspapers.
Mm-hmm.
And you look at the procedure provided in the Constitution, and you look at that motion, and is the subsection B of that section 36 that I think
Mm-hmm.
that clearly states that in your motion you must state the full particulars.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, what is your case?
Yes.
What are you relying on? And you are to ensure that you put every detail
Mm-hmm.
in that motion so that when that motion is circulated to the members of the House of Representatives in the first instance, and thereafter, if it reaches the the Electoral College, members would have the benefit of scrutinizing what your claim is and to consider whether or not you have sufficient merit in what you are going after, what
In
you're
look,
seeking.
sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. So that you have a situation where you present the motion, and one of the objectives of presenting such a motion is to convince the members of both houses
Mm-hmm.
that um, there is merit in your claim, and you have, in fact, in a convincing way, made out a case so that you go the next step. You go forward to the next step, which is the establishment of a tribunal.
Do you think that she laid out a strong enough case against the president in her
There
motion?
was, and I hasten to tell you, there were no particulars in that motion. No particulars. They were vague, they were general, some speculative, some reflecting street talk and gossip. And that is what it was from my point of view.
Okay, so then this is what I am trying to grasp. So I'm going to ask you to put on a hat that you've never worn. Let's say you were the political leader of a party or you were the opposition leader. Why would you then decide that you want to go further with a motion that you can't support?
I think it was pure mischief, and it was political mischief.
Okay.
I think that I think that this country, the leaders of our country, I think they have gone off track. I think that they have forgotten that we are in the middle of a pandemic. We are in a crisis situation, and we ought to address that situation in the most serious possible way, or the most serious possible ways. And all of the acrimony in the politics. I'm not saying that the politicians should not be ever watchful over the actions of a government. That is what our system demands.
Yes.
That is what the structure provides for. But we have to give priority to the people at some time in our existence. Put the people in front of everything else. And that is what did not happen by what took place concerning that motion.
Did you have the opportunity to see the oh my goodness, the word fly straight out my extraordinary sitting that took place on Thursday?
I looked at every minute of it on the television, and I could not miss any of it because I was so taken aback. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I wondered whether the members of the inner chambers of our parliament, who cannot sit there without taking the oath that is in the appendix to our constitution, that they were actually acting as if they had rehearsed what took place on Capitol Hill, United States of America, a few months ago.
So you also felt as if some of the behavior was reflective of what took place in Washington, D.C. earlier this year,
Definitely
January.
so. The only difference is you had outsiders storming Capitol Hill.
Yeah.
And in this case, you had insiders who were determined to ensure that a motion that they brought to the parliament
I want
and that they had to pilot does not succeed. This is the foolishness of this whole scenario.
No, you're absolutely right. To me, it's like you bring something, or you've it's like your grand charge, right? So your grand charge, you ramage yourself, and then you kind of realize, well, I don't have anything to back this thing up, so now let me sabotage it. And I thought you're absolutely right. Why would you come and sabotage your own motion in that way?
That is the critical question to be asked. But the leader of the opposition, remember, she had given notice to the public. She said, "I know I will not succeed." Did she say that?
Yes, she did.
Not on record.
She did. She
saying
did.
that. She said she knew that because of the numbers, she will not succeed. In other words, she knew that that flippant approach that she had taken in drafting that motion, whoever drafted it for her, that it had no merit in it and it will not succeed, because the move in doing something like that is to convince other people, persuade other people, other members of the parliament, particularly in the first instance, the House of Representatives.
I'm in agreement with you there, because I looked at it and I thought to myself, if I'm bringing a motion like that to the parliament, as if although I'm going from the position of, if I'm bringing that motion seriously, in a manner that is serious, then I'm not going to be undermining the motion in that way. But it leads me to ask this question now. Was she ever actually serious about the motion, in your opinion?
No, the answer is no. She was never serious about it.
Okay. Now, you have functioned as Speaker of the House. If I'm not mistaken, it would have been under Pandey's tenure as Prime Minister, you would have functioned as Speaker of the House?
Under Mr. Robinson's tenure, the NAR.
Right. So it would have been even further back than I was thinking. Tell me what your experience as a Speaker of the House was like.
I had the advantage as the Speaker to have been very familiar with the floor. I came from the floor of the House to be elevated to the position of Speaker. And I'll tell you this, at that time, the negotiations for bringing the NAR together were very fierce. And we went into government as a coalition of forces. And I was one of the chief architects. I used to be the chairman of the ULF.
Right.
And the chairman of the ULF, as the chairman of the ULF, I played a very, very influential role in seeing things put in place. So I was one of the chief negotiators across the table, across the board. And when I was made Speaker, it was felt in a lot of quarters that Mr. Robinson had put me there to silence me.
To silence you?
Yes.
Okay.
And
Explain how you being Speaker would silence you.
Well, I would not be in a cabinet. I will not be running a ministry.
Okay.
I will not. I would have withdrawn myself from the active politics.
Right.
And I will not be in the way of anyone. So
Okay.
that, you know. So, but this was one of the views at that time. But I had I think it was a 6-week. Dr. Williams had sent me to a parliamentary training seminar in the United Kingdom. He chose me out of the entire, in those days I think we had 36 members.
Yeah.
And he chose me, a member of the opposition, an opposition chief whip, to go and do that training at Westminster Palace. And I went there for about 6 weeks.
What was it like?
Well, it was very, very, very instructive in terms of the spirit and the working of a parliament. Because it was a sort of an on-hands training session where you were interacting with the Lord Chancellor and the Speaker of the House and the ministers of government and all the dignitaries who were engaged in the running of the Westminster government. So that it was something that was very, very, and it was not me alone. It was done under the auspices of the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association. And they do this every year, but they don't take from each country every year. We were lucky that we were selected. So they brought other parliamentarians from different parts of the world, Australia, um, those Pacific islands. I forget their names now, some of the smaller islands. And all these members of parliament got together and were undergoing this training session. So that I realized I knew about the importance of standing orders and so on.
Right.
And more than that, when I was made speaker, I had all of this with me. I don't think Mr. Robbins knew that or ever knew that I had undergone that training and so on. But whenever we had meetings, our private meetings with all the different um, political parties and interests, talking about this coalition of forces, he would always say, "Let Nizam chair the session. Let him chair the session, and I will chair this." And he actually complimented me in the businesslike way that I handled these discussions, so that I had a very excellent background and training, and my own as not leader, as opposition chief whip, and organizing the debates in the parliament and all of that. I went in there with a wealth of knowledge, which I thought that I had used, and I went in there with the intention of bringing the office of Speaker and Parliament to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. I felt that the Parliament was too far removed from the people. And
Okay.
I had some wonderful experiences and extremely outstanding achievements in
I'm
my
gonna
time.
I'm gonna come back to the point about bringing the parliament closer to the people, but I want to ask you this. Based on your experience, the experience that you just described there, having spent 6 weeks in the United Kingdom doing a particular kind of training, bringing that knowledge back into our parliament, and then sitting as our Speaker of the House for the period that you sat as, what do you make of what you saw on Thursday?
I think it was an abomination. I regret that I have to use these kinds of words, but it was scandalous, it was reckless, it was dangerous. You know, we had this strange coincidence.
Why do you say dangerous? Because that's a really strong word to use.
Dangerous because of the disrespect of the years that we have put in this country as an independent nation, and even when we were a colony, you know, the people who represented us in the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago, in the Legislative Council, they were not only highly respected, but they showed great respect. Not that they didn't fight for the rights of the people of Trinidad and Tobago, they did so vehemently at every turn throughout the years. But you do not seek to destroy the forum that has been established for the protection of our people, their rights, and their freedoms. You,
Nizam, I
you
want
do
to
not
ask you this.
easily trifle with such institutions, Rhoda.
No, I am in total agreement with you because there's a point I want to make about your use of the word freedoms, or rather, there's a conversation I want us to have. So before we get into that conversation, let me ask you to do me this favor. Can you give me and my audience a working definition of the word democracy? And I'm asking that because it leads into what you said there about freedoms.
Uh, you're asking me to do what?
Give me a working definition of democracy. You had your grandsons or your nephew come by today to help you with the setup. If you had to define democracy for them, how would you define democracy for them?
I would read the first 2 pages of the Constitution to them.
Okay.
And I tell you something, you know, those words are so explicit, they are so strong, they are so compelling. And I think we as a people, we fail to observe what is written in our Constitution. the Constitution starts up by saying that this is the supreme law of the land,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and it starts up with certain declarations,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm just thumbing through here.
That's fine. You take your time and pull it up. In the meantime, I'm just gonna hail out some people who are on the comment thread here, and because they're all paying attention to what you're saying, and they've
Shall
been
I
saying things.
shall I just read in part?
Yes, of course, of course, of course.
Thank you very much. It is hereby recognized and declared that in Trinidad and Tobago there have existed and shall continue to exist without rights and discrimination by reason of race, origin, color, religion, or sex, the freedoms, the following freedoms: fundamental human rights and freedoms.
Mm-hmm.
Fundamental human rights and freedoms. There
Mm-hmm.
are some typographical errors here in my copy, unfortunately. um, A. The right of the individual to life, liberty, security of the person, and enjoyment of property, and the right not to be deprived thereof,
Mm-hmm.
except by due process of law.
Mm-hmm.
And the
I'm
right of
glad
the
that I'm
individual,
glad that you're reading these bits of the Constitution for us, and
the
Nizam, I'm
right,
really happy about
yes,
that.
the right of the individual to equality before the law and the protection of the law.
Mm-hmm.
The right of the individual to respect for his private and family life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, if you're finished reading excerpts, I want to add something now. This is the conversation I want to have with you. Because you raise an important point about how we behaved in the parliament and the comparisons to be drawn between our behavior and what happened in the Capitol in the United States. Now, one of the things I've noticed about how we use, or rather how Americans use words like democracy and freedom, especially if it's persons of Caucasian European descent in the United States, it is almost as if they think freedom and democracy belongs to a particular group of persons, one, and that freedom and democracy does not have any responsibility attached with it. So freedom means I could do what I want, when I want, how I want, and I don't have to necessarily pay attention to the rules that we all agreed to, because that's what happens with a democracy, right? You have these debates, you take a vote, and you go with what the majority has decided. And if you go with what the majority has decided, it means that at some point there'll be a minority group that didn't get what they wanted. That's my understanding of how democracies tend to work. So if I'm wrong, feel free to correct me. So if we have a situation where our Constitution lays out precisely how you go about bringing a motion against the president, why would the opposition leader, who is part of our democratic process here, who is part of our governance structure here, decide within the parliament that she's not going to follow what the Constitution says? Why? Why would she do something like that?
The state of Trinidad and Tobago, the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, didn't fall from the sky. There is a preamble.
Mm-hmm.
There is a preamble to the Constitution.
Mm-hmm.
And while you were just talking with me there,
Yeah.
I was glancing at the preamble to the Constitution.
Do you want to share it with us? You mind sharing it with us?
I really, really thank you for the opportunity. It starts up like this, the preamble. Whereas the people of Trinidad and Tobago have affirmed that the nation of Trinidad and Tobago is founded upon principles that acknowledge the supremacy of God, faith in fundamental human rights and freedoms, the position of the family in a society of free men and free institutions, the dignity of the human person, and the equal and inalienable rights with which all members of the human family are endowed by their Creator. And you have um, a number of them, A, B, C, D, E, have asserted their belief in a democratic society in which all persons may, to the extent of their capacity, play some part in the institutions of the national life, and thus develop and maintain due respect for lawfully constituted authority.
Mm-hmm.
This office of Speaker is a lawfully constituted authority.
Mm-hmm.
Recognize, this is another paragraph,
Mm-hmm.
recognize that men and institutions remain free only when freedom is founded upon respect for moral and spiritual values and the rule of law. Parliament is ruled by the law, the Constitution, by the standing orders, and other laws.
Nizam, I want to ask you, break it down for me and my audience. What was supposed to transpire in the Electoral College on Thursday, as you understand it? As a lawyer, as a former speaker, as you understand it, what was the process that was supposed to occur in Parliament on Thursday?
Well, you had two separate sittings. You had a sitting of the House of Representatives,
Mm-hmm.
and you had a motion before the House of Representatives.
Mm-hmm.
That is the motion filed by the leader of the opposition.
Mm-hmm.
And the procedure that was adopted by the Speaker was the correct procedure.
Mm-hmm.
And she has been accused of all kinds of things, and I think that is very unfortunate. The regulations relating to the Electoral College, and I am just jumping ahead here to come back.
Sure.
Those regulations allowed the Speaker to draw up rules for this historic, unprecedented sitting of the Electoral College. This never happened before.
Mm-hmm.
And she drew up rules.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so she went to the House of Representatives and she allowed the mover of the motion to present the motion.
Mm-hmm.
And during the presentation, before that, she was on her feet and she was laying out the procedure and trying to explain to the members of the House why she had undertaken such an approach,
Mm-hmm.
and how she had done her research and she had looked at the Nigerian experience and the Kenyan experience, among other members of the Commonwealth. That is commonplace. That is why they had asked me, they had sent me to Westminster to attend that parliamentary seminar to strengthen parliamentary procedure and procedural development as we move along. And so that while she was doing that, she was being interrupted at every turn. And look at I think it is Standing Order 54.
Mm-hmm.
54. And it says here, the Speaker in the House and the Chairman in committee shall be responsible for the observance of the rules of order
Mm-hmm.
in the House and the committee respectively. and their decision upon any point of order shall not be open to appeal and shall not be reviewed by the House except upon a substantive motion made after notice. And the subsection here is very instructive. If we are to, we on principle, we agree that we must adhere to the law. It says here, when the speaker or chairman rises, any member then speaking or wishing to speak shall immediately resume his seat, and the House or the committee shall be silent.
So this is what I wanted to understand. How could we have had on Thursday so many instances where MPs were getting up and speaking over the speaker? How? How?
That is undreamt of. You have upheavals during sittings in any parliament in the Commonwealth. But I tell you something, nothing is ever aimed at the speaker. They are having it out amongst themselves. And the speaker is never drawn into it. Never drawn into it.
If you had been speaker on Thursday, is there anything that you think you would have been able to do differently, or
I would have appealed to those who were behaving so scandalously. And I may have warned them a few times, but I remember at the very outset of my tenure as Speaker, I told members they must always walk. In those days, the standing orders was in the form of a booklet with a blue cover. I had told them, don't ever come to the Parliament without your blue book. So anytime you want to guide me, you guide me through what is provided for in the blue book. Nowadays they have the updated one. It is a green cover.
okay?
But the fact of the matter is that you asked me what I would have done. Honestly, I was amazed at the poise, the charm, the maturity, the overall disposition of the Honorable Speaker in the manner in which she tolerated this sort of unbecoming and scandalous behavior. You know, in retrospect, on reflection, two things. I thought she anticipated what was going to happen and she prepared herself for them. And also, on the other hand, on reflection, I think she was guided by the Holy Spirit. I cannot imagine, her resilience and the degree of patience that she actually displayed.
I felt the parliamentary staff were pretty professional as well, were very professional, because I saw the clerk of the house offering advice on a number of occasions.
That has always been like that.
Yes.
That has always been like that. And I am talking about from 30 years ago.
Any of the staff that are there now, were there 30 years ago?
Yes.
Okay.
The clerk of the house.
Okay, so she would have been there 30 years ago.
Jackie Sampson Miguel.
Yes.
She came in there as a young career person into the public service. She and a young lady called Dawn Dolly from Tobago.
Right.
They were really, really fantastic, trainees, and in no time at all, they rose. Unfortunately, Miss Dolly is no longer with us. She's gone, may her soul rest in peace. But wonderful people, very reliable, very competent, very knowledgeable, and you'll be surprised to know how resourceful these individuals are in helping us to run our parliament.
Yes, I mean, so this brings me back to the point you made about bringing the parliament closer to the people. One of the things that I've appreciated about this iteration of the office of the parliament, because I only really started paying attention to governance issues from around 2010, 2011. And I appreciate that they have a YouTube channel and they are on social media, and there's a way in which I can get information, off websites or wherever with them. In your mind, back when you were speaker, how were you trying to get the parliament closer to the people? Because I agree with you. I feel we still need to become more engaged with our parliament.
I'm so delighted that you have asked that question because I think I need to remind our country, um, through your humble efforts, I did something that was very historic. I introduced something called the Youth Parliamentary Debate.
Oh, that happened under you.
I was the founder of that. It was my
Okay.
idea. And I recruited secondary school students at the A level, um, and we put them together as government and opposition. And they would come and sit in the parliament, and they will conduct debates. We will choose topics for them, and they will conduct debates. And they had, like, you know, their own speaker, reflecting the composition of parliament. And I had the total cooperation of government and opposition. And PTSC will pull up with um, one of their buses, and they were waiting there. And when the session was finished, the parliamentarians, quote unquote parliamentarians, they will journey in a PTSC bus to the president's house so that they could have tea with the head of the parliament, His Excellency the President. What an experience for these young
Of
people.
course.
I met one or two of them, and um, they, at least two, have reminded me, two judges. One is now a justice of appeal, and another one, I met him as a high court judge, reminded me that they participated in the debate in the early days. It was an annual event, and I would bring down the speakers from the Caribbean Commonwealth, and they will come and address the students and so on. So that was one thing.
Yeah.
When we had that unfortunate development in 1990,
Yes.
right, I was already working, I had already had a working relationship with an organization in Port of Spain called MLIO, Morval Lavantil Improvement Organization, or something like that.
Right.
And when this disaster struck, um, I had people from Faizabad and people from MLIO demanding, or rather begging me, please, we want to come and clean up that parliament. It was so filthy after the havoc of July 27, 1990. And they were the ones who came and they cleaned up initially. Initially, it was very, very symbolic. Do you know something? The mace that is carried by the sergeant at arms is at the beginning of a parliament, is never placed in the parliament until a speaker is elected.
I didn't know that.
Immediate, immediately after, immediately after, it is there in the procedural rules.
I need to read
Immediately,
the. I will need to reread it because I'm now going to ask you, where did the mace come from?
good. When, and this is something that our people must know, immediately after the speaker is elected and he takes up his position, oath of office, etc., etc., and he takes up his position, the sergeant at arms then brings the mace and places it in front of the speaker and in front of where you see the clerk and the deputy sit in front of the speaker. There's a stand there for that. Rhoda, the symbolism of that, you know what? By placing that mace there, what the sergeant at arms is telling the speaker, this is the authority of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. They are the ones who, through a process, they have elected you to govern and preside over their deliberations through their representatives. That is the symbolic significance of the mace.
Nizam, do you think we've lost sight of what independence and democracy means to us here in Trinidad and Tobago?
Definitely so. Definitely so. We take everything for granted. We take everything. And that is why we are in the mess that we are in today. Our leaders have not taught our people, we have not taught, as leaders, we have not taught our people that we are governed by laws. And to be civilized, we have to adhere to these laws, and these laws are sacred, and respect for people in authority. When school children see clips on television of what the parliamentarians were doing to the speaker on that day, that terrible Wednesday, what do you expect children to be thinking about? Do you think they will,
And doing in a classroom.
and what do you expect them to do in a classroom? And before we have had the closure of schools and all of that, I'm sure that you would be aware, and a lot of your listeners would be aware of the disciplinary problems we have been having in the schools and the teachers have been facing. Why do we have this breakdown? Why do we have this breakdown? In the same way, I have noticed, which was a strange and a bizarre coincidence, bizarre as what took place in the Parliament chamber, the passing of one of my brothers in faith on that very evening, that night, early evening, Yasin Abu Bakr. May his soul rest in peace. You know, um, what are we actually telegraphing to the country when we behave in this kind of way? And then you are asking people to be disciplined and to be productive and to be well mannered and all of that.
I want to ask you this as you talk about what behavior in Parliament what it can do, or what it can trigger in a society, especially as you reference the passing of Imam Abu Bakr. He would have been part and parcel of activity that took place in the Parliament, right? The 1990,
In
the attempted coup
yes,
d'etat. And I speak to people who are in national security that say all the time that they, in their considered opinion, a lot of what happened in 1990 would have led to shifts and changes in our culture here in terms of crime and criminality and criminal activity. So he would have passed on Thursday. What are your thoughts and feelings on what happened in 1990 and in the passing of the Imam?
Some of my friends from yesteryear, I have read them uh, their remarks, their reaction to his passing,
Mm-hmm.
and some of them are saying that we are yet to seriously consider what were the causes that led to what took place in 1990.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result of that, the matter still remains unresolved in spite of a commission of inquiry and everything else. But we know how commissions of inquiry operate in this country. We get a report and we read it and get media coverage, and then it is shelved.
Mm-hmm.
Um, my thoughts on that is that we have not repaired the damage of 1990.
Mm-hmm.
That is why we can have 2021 um, with an October quote unquote revolution.
What are your thoughts on that October Revolution phrase? And this is going to be my final question to you. This is where we're going to wrap it up. Do you think that it smacked of sedition at all?
I have not given it sufficient thought, but I tell you,
Mm-hmm.
in a similar conversation as I am having with you, um, someone else in an interview asked me, and I said, um, thoughts were coming to my mind as the discussion was developing.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I am so disturbed by what has taken place that I am wondering whether I should not seek a meeting with the Prime Minister in my capacity as a former Speaker of the House of Representatives,
Mm-hmm.
seeing what has happened by the present Speaker of the House, and at least tell the, the Prime Minister that what has transpired should not go unnoticed and unattended in the same way we brushed aside 27th of July 1990.
Mm-hmm.
And if needs be, send your people and find out from the Commonwealth Secretariat and perhaps the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association.
Mm-hmm.
And we with our false sense of arrogance, feel we know everything. Like
Hubris
what?
and arrogance, yes.
But yeah. Oh, where you going? Where you going to England for? And that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
We go to them for reference to all our laws in our justice system,
Mm-hmm.
right? And send your people, get your High Commission in the United Kingdom busy about this, so that if you come up with a course of action to show the people of Trinidad and Tobago that you are acting in their defense and on their behalf, that you do not miss the mark.
Mm-hmm.
I have read where um, independent Senator Anthony Vera,
Mm-hmm.
he said he's contemplating a motion of a motion of contempt, a contempt motion.
Yes, I saw that.
But I do not believe, and he's, from what I have read, he is only considering a motion because, they insulted him and
They
other.
insulted him and other independent senators, but I
Yeah,
feel it's larger than the insult to them. I mean, I can understand why he would want to file it based on his bench and how they treated his bench, but they really treated the entire parliament with contempt.
this is what the point you're making is exactly what I'm trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
That motion has to be wider than that. It has to be wider than that.
Perhaps the leader of government business can also file a motion, or can there be a joint filing of the motion, you think?
I think it could be a joint filing, but independent senators may want to keep their independence, and they may not want to join with the government.
Fair enough, which is why perhaps they can do separate filings, but filings of the same type of motion.
Well, I tell you,
I would like to see it.
if he wants to file, a motion, and it is something that is a little too narrow, and
Yeah.
I compliment him for his courage and the stand that he's taking. Somebody's got to stand up in this country. Somebody has to stand up.
I agree.
And if he does it in the Senate, it can be done in
The
the lower
house.
house as well.
Good. Good.
As I
Good.
say, I have not had the research facilities as an individual to get into the nitty-gritty of this kind of thing. And I don't know whether I possess the necessary energy, you know, to handle something like this. But I am seriously wondering whether or not the Prime Minister should, but the Prime Minister is rather busy. I see somewhere, between this week and next week, he's heading off to
Yes,
some climate
I believe he's traveling soon. Yeah.
to the UK, on some Commonwealth thing, and so I not Commonwealth, climate, some
Yes,
climate
it's a
project.
climate change convention, but I know that he's meant to be traveling soon.
Yes. So I don't know how early he will have time, but I don't think that this matter should be. We should just be complaining, and something concrete is not done,
I agree. I don't think we should just
and that
decide that
helps.
yesterday is yesterday.
Yes, because that is what happened um, with July 27, 1990, and we had a shift in culture. We had a shift in culture, and we had a shift in behavior, and we had a shift and a descent as far as our discipline is concerned. Oh, and it has affected our schools, it has affected our workplace, it has affected everywhere, you know, it has affected our judicial system.
It has.
Not
To
to
me, it
mention,
has affected almost all of our institutions, really. Almost
yes,
all. I can't really think of, because if you would ask me up until this week, I would have said the only institution in and of itself that has not been dragged into the mud in that way is the office of the parliament. I'm not talking about the parliament, but the office of the parliament. And I felt after this week, the way in which things went down on Thursday, even the office of the parliament has became tainted by.
tainted,
Yes.
tainted.
Yeah.
And
So, go ahead.
yes,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
so that, we cannot left this matter unattended. It has to be addressed. It has to be addressed. And I am thinking aloud with the hope. You can't imagine, Rhoda, a 94-year-old lady phoned me. I don't know where she got my mobile phone number. No, 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 I beg your pardon. She called me in my office. And I am not in my office all the time. And this lady phoned me. And I was astonished. She knew me when I was speaker. Her husband, deceased husband, was an independent senator. And this lady called me to compliment me and to thank me for actually um, speaking out against what happened. And she said, "Oh, we need more people like you." A 94-year-old lady, former members of parliament. You can't imagine the number of people who are actually calling me and telling me. But I have gotten to a stage in my life where I have my own limitations.
I
I've worked,
understand.
you
So,
know,
I want to ask you this, Nizam. Even with the limitations, inshallah, can I have you back here to talk to us about the Constitution again?
inshallah, anytime at all, I would
Because I
love to.
thoroughly enjoyed
Love
this.
to.
Thoroughly
I,
enjoyed this.
yes, I'll tell you something. You know what is hurting me?
Tell me.
A former prime minister of our country will denigrate the parliament in the way she
Somebody who
did.
knows better. She ought to know better and she ought to do better.
And you know something? Once a speaker, always a speaker. A Ghanaian visitor in an audience in Trinidad referred to me and Speaker Nizam Mohammed, and there was a chuckle because I was out of office, And he said, "What is the laugh about?" So I said to him, I was at the head table with him, "What? What is the laugh about?" I say, "I am no longer in office, so they feel you shouldn't call me speaker." You know what he said? "What you people know. Once a speaker, always a speaker. What you people know." You know what he meant by that? What I understood him to mean by that? I took the oath of office as to become the speaker of the parliament, and I have to live with that oath until I die. So once a speaker, always a speaker, and it has to do with the oath of office that you have taken. Standing up for the Constitution, standing up for the rule of law, and standing up for the people of Trinidad and Tobago. A former speaker of the parliament sat in that house on Wednesday and insulted one of my successors. And that hurts very much. That kind of street behavior from a former speaker of the House of Representatives. 30 years he's a member of parliament. And for 30 years he has never faced the electorate. What a ride on the backs of the people. And someone sitting next to him, pointing his finger, a little boy, pointing his finger to the Speaker of the House of Representatives, whom the people put there, and telling her, "People vote for we, who vote for you?" Such stupidity, such total ignorance of the process and the system under which he has found himself as a useless member of parliament. He should be under training as to how to operate in a village council rather than be sitting in the House of Representatives. That is the kind of mess that we are putting our country in. So you understand, and the hurt that I feel, many people who have respect for the rule of law and for good governance, and who understand that the Constitution is there to protect us and our freedoms and our safety and our families and our peacefulness in a society. I tell you, Rhoda, many, many people are deeply worried, and they are looking for answers with respect to what has happened. We have to clean up this mess, even if we have to spend the money, which is their money, the taxpayers' money, to ensure that we do it right and bring justice for and on behalf of the people of Trinidad and Tobago for desecrating their parliament. It must not be a getaway situation like July 1990. It must not happen. I thank you for the opportunity. God bless you and your listeners.
God bless you too, Nizam Mohammed, former speaker, former chairman of the Police Service Commission. Thank you so much for your time this evening.
It has been a pleasure.
It has been. Take care.
Take
Folks, that was former Speaker of the House, former Chairman of the Police Service Commission, Attorney Nizam Mohammed, giving us a masterclass in civics. I hope you all enjoyed this session with him this evening. I had no idea it was going to turn out to be as amazing as this. So I hope you all enjoyed your time with him as much as I enjoyed doing this interview. Take care. I will see you all on Friday, right? Friday is the next time I'm going to be here. Bye.